Hello, and welcome to the EDHREC Room. Rec Room episodes are a little more of a relaxed chat about recent events, and we're doing this in place of a traditional episode this week because, well, guys, there's a lot to discuss. The past 2-ish weeks have been some of the most eventful shakeups in the history of the Commander format. So here we are. I hope you guys are doing well.
We're doing.
Yeah. And additionally, we were actually all together when this information came down. And that's also part of the reason this is a little bit easier to do for a show without video, because we're on a time crunch this week for that reason.
Yeah, it was a really lovely work event. It was a great time to get to hang out with you guys. So I'm glad that we could all be together when a whole lot of news happened.
We were literally at brunch Monday morning when this bit of news hit.
Well, let's talk about the news then. I know it's not the best news that's been coming out of the past couple of days, but I feel like we just got to get to the point because there's a lot to say, and we don't have a lot of time to say it in.
Indeed. So what is the news? Last Monday, on the 23rd, 4 cards were banned. Dockside Extortionist, Nadu Winged Wisdom, Jeweled Lotus, and Mana Crypt. They were banned in Commander. There was a lot of response to that, including, unfortunately, pretty substantial backlash. Several members of the Rules Committee closed off their social media, and the vitriol rose to the level of some pretty dangerous stuff, including threats against their safety at events such as the upcoming MagicCon in Las Vegas. Then this past Monday, on October 1st, the Rules Committee announced, as a result of the threats last week against Rules Committee members, it has become impossible for us to continue operating as an independent entity, given that we have asked Wizards of the Coast to assume responsibility for Commander, and they will be making decisions and announcements going forward. Worth noting that before this, some members of the Commander Advisory Group had stepped away from that role, starting with Josh Lee-Kwai, and also that after this announcement, Wizards of the Coast has also done a stream addressing the future of the format, which we would like to get into later too. We know a lot of people come to shows like ours for our thoughts on big events, so here we are.
Yeah, so to break down the bans, we did a separate Rec Room last week. Definitely check that video out where we kind of give our thoughts on the bannings themselves, what that means immediately. But today we're going to more focus on what came after. And so starting with the Rules Committee dissolving, which is, we said that the bannings a couple weeks ago was the biggest event, at least in my mind personally, in the history of Commander, at least in the past several years. This trumps that 1,000 times over, where the Rules Committee is dissolving. It is going away. It's people that literally built this format to what it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've often heard the statement about how people are getting tired of living through once-in-a-lifetime events in recent world history, and we've had a couple of once-in-a-lifetime events in Commander in the last week and a half. So yeah, I'm getting tired of living through once-in-a-lifetime EDH events as well.
Indeed. And Matt, as you mentioned in our last Rec Room episode, I think it is worth noting in that episode, we kind of viewed the bans purely from the perspective of game health. Like, we acknowledged the impact that this has on players and on game stores who felt that their collections were monetarily impacted by those bans. But we ourselves did want to focus on the game. It's very clear that all the stuff outside of just the game is taking center stage right now, though. Yeah. And I do got to say, I really appreciate that when this news hit, it was nice that we were at brunch. and what we did in the wake of the news, you know what we did? We played some Magic. We played a lot of games. Like, I meant what I said last week. A big cure for worrying about the game is to heckin' play the game. And it was really nice to have that as a centering experience with you guys.
Yeah, having some a support system as we're learning this to kind of process together. Yeah. It helped me at least kind of figure out how I feel, at least in the immediate sense, and then moving forward. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about. But it really threw a shadow. And I don't want to kind of bring our feelings too much into it, because there's so much that affects more than just us. And that's what I really think we need to give light to.
Yeah, I think first things first, let's talk about the people that are impacted by this the most, which is the people on the Rules Committee and the people on the CAG.
Yeah.
This is something that they've been devoting a pretty significant portion of their day and week and months and years to. It's a job, despite not being a job for a lot of these people. And that's just no longer a thing. Like, prior to Monday, this was something that, I assume most of them imagined would be something they'd be doing for years to come. And now it's not a thing they're doing anymore. That's a pretty huge thing to have come out of the blue and hit you with. So I was immediately, that was my very first thought was to feel bad for people that like really love this game and love doing the job, and to have that be forced out of their hands, like to have them feel like they were in a position where they had to give that up. That is really, really rough.
Yeah, and Jim LePage, he did say in his statement, because he released a statement on his personal social media, which very quickly got locked down. But he did release a statement that said, they approached Wizards of the Coast asking for help, asking for somebody to kind of tap in, because Wizards of the Coast has so many more resources, so much manpower. They are able to, have people on the payroll that are going to do this and make this part of their job. Whereas a group of volunteers, I can't reinforce enough. The rules committee did this and didn't take a penny. They didn't make money for themselves. Jim, Olivia, they shared pictures of, well, here's my mana crypts. Here's my,
right.
like all these banned cards that like I still own and I'm taking pictures. They didn't make money off of stuff like this. And so the effects of what happened is it's just so severe that these people who like have been doing this for years and years, especially the original rules committee members, like Toby, like Gavin Duggan, like Scott Larrabee, these people have been doing it for so long that they even are willing to throw in the towel. It shows a lot about just how severe the problem was. Yeah. If people that are that invested, who Scott Larrabee, he works for organized play within Wizards office, and he also is stepping away from this. And I think that shows just how bad, and just is a good data point for folks who may not know how invested they were, how long they'd been doing this. It's a big deal. And it's just groundbreaking. Like, yeah, I'm still trying to struggle to get my thoughts together, just like how widespread and like deeply profound this impact will be.
I think a lot of people out there will A, think that the format was already controlled by Wizards of the Coast, and B, be surprised that there's concern about the movement away from an independent rules committee and bringing it more in-house. To give some voice to that, this began as a grassroots project. It began as the community format. And when a corporation takes over for that, it does change some of the incentive structure around what will govern game health. That's certainly what has led to a lot of the concern. I share in plenty of that concern. Hopefully that's something we'll get into a little bit later. But also the way that it happened, resulting from such vitriol leveled at certain people. I mean, I thought the individuals who responded to the Walking Dead fiasco in such a horrible way was one of the most embarrassing things that could have happened in the community. I guess I was wrong.
Well, the community said, hold my beer, Joey, because watch this.
Yeah. Like, I understand how people can become frustrated. I think that the banning announcement did wind up being clumsy in several ways. But even if that's the case, frustration or being in pain is never an excuse to make that pain contagious.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. I've never been more ashamed to be a Magic player.
Yeah, it really is bad. And it should go without saying that, like, if you see people that are bad actors in your local community, in your friend group, it kind of puts the impetus on us, like, we have to call that out. You have to tell your friend, like, that's not cool. Like, dial it down, whatever it is. Somebody put it, I think it was Dan Sheehan, put it, this is the repercussion of people prioritizing cards over people. Accountability is such a huge thing. I just want to encourage everybody that if you see a friend acting like a bad actor, we have to like address that on a personal level.
And bad actor doesn't just mean threats.
Absolutely, right. I mean, that's one thing I'd like to note here too. Like they absolutely got death threats. That wasn't all they got. Like there was a lot of people whose behavior and responses to them maybe didn't get up to the point of being a death threat, but just because you didn't threaten someone's life doesn't mean your behavior was acceptable either. A lot of people got way up to it, and way up to it is still unacceptable.
Yeah, I think it's just worth noting that like one of the past times that we saw a level of vitriol in the community in response to something like this was the Chronicles situation, where reprints caused the value of cards to drop out from beneath players. And the levels of vitriol then led to the creation of the reserve list as a way to promise players that their cards will still maintain value. But now the reserve list is something that everyone regrets. When players behave in this manner, behavior, backlash, vitriol like this, that leads to these situations, that leads to these game-altering events. This is how we get reserve lists. It's the biggest example of this is why we can't have nice things. It's just kind of embarrassing.
This is how you get ants.
This is how you get ants. Oh, man.
Yeah. So with that said, so the rules committee was dissolving. And on both of these points that we're going to talk about, Nick Wolf did really good articles over at Commander's Herald, breaking everything down, kind of outlining the timeline of everything too. So definitely check out those articles that Nick did, because I think that was a very level-headed breakdown. So we kind of saw the what happened, but like there's a now what sense of what's going to happen moving forward.
Yeah.
There was a stream on Tuesday with Gavin Verhey, Aaron Forsyth, and Blake Rasmussen about the future and what things are going to look like. And that also another huge shift. Like there's been 3 just enormous events in the past week about if you're a Commander player. And so they talked to kind of about, well, now that we know that Wizards is going to take the charge on Commander moving forward, what does that look like? And there were some things that I've seen a lot of reactions so far going either way on a lot of different points. And I'm curious what the two of you think now that we kind of had a chance to let it sink overnight and really kind of see how we feel.
So my initial reaction was to be very concerned that there was no longer a buffer between WotC printing cards that they knew would make them money regardless of their impact on the format and us. I felt like the rules committee functioned a little bit as kind of a break, and we've heard examples of them telling WotC not to do certain things regards to cards they were printing. They didn't always listen. Jeweled Lotus was one I believe they pushed back on, and we still got it. But having someone at least push back at that point was useful. We know it didn't always work, but that doesn't mean it didn't work sometimes and we just didn't hear about it because a card didn't get printed or it got changed or whatever. So that was my initial concern, that we now no longer had that buffer in place and decisions were going to be made by a company who's directly making money off selling packs, and what sells packs isn't necessarily always what's good for the greater format. However, I felt like a lot of the things in this initial stream reassured me somewhat about particularly that concern.
Well, and Dana, they did kind of ease a little bit of that fear on my end too. And they said it's similar to kind of how there's the Pauper format panel where Gavin Verhey kind of assembled some people who are heavily invested in the Pauper format, making sure they're making decisions, getting feedback by people who actually play and care about the format. They're going to do a similar thing to that with Commander. And that, I hope, is going to be a good situation. They kind of mentioned that they're going to be kind of in an advisory role that the rules committee folks would be if they wanted to stick around. But it would be some other similar folks. And Gavin mentioned 10 to 20 on the stream. We don't have a ton of details just because this is so early in the process. This only happened 2 days ago. Yeah. And so there's a lot of details, but initially it is good to hear that they want to have some sort of committee involved with the community, and they want to keep it a community-driven format. They made that very, very clear.
Yes.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubts that they were being genuine with that statement as well.
Yeah. I want to preface, I'll say this probably several times. I have 100% faith that the folks who, we know and are friends with several designers at Wizards of the Coast. And I feel the same way about them as I did about the Rules Committee. We know that the intention here is health of the game when it comes to those individual folks. At the same time, I still share in a lot of the concerns about a for-profit company now evaluating the game with a different set of biases than the group that came before.
Yep.
Magic is Hasbro's most profitable, some maybe only profitable arm right now, and that's why they've been leaning so hard on the game, on Universes Beyond, on Commander-focused design. And a lot of this can feel like a bit of a setup for decisions that are not aligned with intent to improve the experience, but rather to maximize profit. Individual designers, I absolutely trust them. I just also don't know if I have confidence that someone like Gavin is empowered by WotC to ban cards that are selling packs. I said in the last Rec Room that I was anti-banning Jeweled Lotus, but I also said it's the kind of move that I know Wizards of the Coast probably would never make, or maybe could never make. And in terms of who makes the decisions, I prefer a rules body that is able to make a decision like that if it's necessary, and not one that feels like its hands are tied.
I absolutely would trust Gavin to catch me in a trust fall exercise. I'm a little bit less sure that WotC would allow him to. But I am very confident that Gavin will do all he can to make sure the format continues to be the best it can for the players. The question becomes how much control he has over that. I agree with you there, Joey.
Yeah, well, and somebody put it really well, Kathleen with Loading Ready Run, in response to this, where I'm just going to quote her here. I have zero doubt that WotC employees, quote, in charge, will fight tooth and nail for the best of the format. I have 100% an executive who doesn't play Magic will give themselves the power to overrule those same employees and the second they think they can make more money.
Precisely that. Yeah.
I think that's probably the best way that I can summarize. And so I appreciate Kathleen for vocalizing that and just getting that out there, because that is better said than I think I could myself.
100% cosign. Kathleen, she wise. She good at this. And ultimately, I think if this was a good move, it would have happened already, right? If everyone thought that this was a good move that would improve the health of the game, it would have happened before now. It wouldn't have had to be pushed to this point for it to occur.
Mm-hmm.
This particular moment that just happened recently over the past couple of weeks. That might have been the catalyst. But when it comes to a corporation, we always want to trace it back to incentives. And bottom line is going to be an incentive here. I feel like there is plenty of history of bans of Wizards of the Coast when it comes to their tournament formats, for why I have a little bit of concern about, what things will go into the decision making for bans. For instance, the way that the company has handled bans around stuff like Hogak in Modern, or the scam decks with delays on bans with cards like Grief and Fury. Even Nadu took some extra time to ban in Modern, as an example. The One Ring is on the tip of everyone's tongue for being a problem card in tournament play right now.
Yeah.
And at least in those formats, there's some tournament data to back up when a ban is necessary. Commander doesn't have data like that. It's all just kind of vibes, and I don't know that vibes can move the needle necessarily. But there have been examples of Wizards having clearly different incentives that affect bans in other formats, and I believe that can also be the case for Commander, which is where some of my concerns rise up in terms of what the game's health will look like with some mistake cards.
Yeah, one pushback I've seen from people, when you say, well, I'm a little bit concerned about WotC taking this over and no longer having a filter is, well, they take over every other format and have no problems with those formats. Well, those are different. The goal of every other Magic format is to win the game without regard for how your opponent feels about how that game went. That's not true in Commander.
Yeah.
Commander is a unique thing where at least part of the play experience is everyone at the table enjoying themselves, for the most part. That's not something that gets considered anywhere else in Magic.
Yeah.
So things are a little bit different. You can print a card that goes really, really hard in Modern, and as long as it's not broken in terms of tournament results, it is irrelevant what the play experience is like, for the most part. If it slows up games and interferes with how fast tournaments go, they've banned cards for slowing up play or something. But it doesn't matter if it's miserable for your opponents to play against, as long as it's not disruptive in terms of time spent or in terms of tournament results. EDH is unique in that regard. That's not something they've ever had to interface with before. And that's why I think that isn't a good response by saying, well, WotC runs a bunch of other formats. They don't run a bunch of other formats like this.
And it is WotC's current structure, current patterns, current pace of set release that got us into positions like this in the first place, right? It is the cards that they printed and didn't reprint them enough to lower their price, which is part of what got so many people frustrated with the value of these cards to begin with.
Yeah.
I heard Aaron Forsyth say that the way the company makes money is by making a game that people enjoy, that it's bad business to make decisions that make people want to quit. He said that that's how they've run card design, and that's how they want to run a ban list too. I just want to acknowledge that certain ban decisions in other formats and certain card design trends are worthy of scrutiny, as it is, after all, some of those trends that got us into this situation in the first place.
Yeah.
Current trends have made the Commander format, and indeed the game, more popular than ever before, but also current trends have put so much emphasis on Commander that they cause adverse effects in other formats, and that is a concern.
Yeah.
Current design trends have made the game extremely popular, and current design trends have given us Nadus.
Yeah, I feel like if the rules committee unbans a card, it's because they felt it was worth unbanning. If this new WotC entity unbans the card, I can't be sure there isn't a financial incentive in that the way I was before.
People accuse the rules committee of was there insider trading with this? It's just if you thought there was a profit motive there, wait until I tell you about the company that sells the game. You guys.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think, again, to kind of highlight why there's a little bit of concern here, once more, this is the company that had the Pinkerton fiasco last year, the fiasco with the open game license in D&D, the company that fired 1,100 members of staff right before the Christmas holidays last year and laid off 20% total of their workforce in 2023.
It's repeatedly used AI art for different things. There's a list of these of issues that we could bring up that are some pretty ethically sketchy things.
I've said it before that game designers want you to play and enjoy their game. Corporations want you to buy their game.
Those aren't the same thing necessarily.
Exactly. And I've always viewed the rules committee members as game designers. And I am, again, so appreciative to every designer who is fighting to keep the game healthy despite the nonstop pressure that they've been dealing with from down on high. But the pressure from down on high has been producing things like Nadu. I don't blame Michael Majors, the lead designer of MH3, for making Nadu. I blame a system and structure with a breakneck set of releases and which forces a design team into certain circumstances where they have to design modern cards for the Commander format, and then they don't have time to playtest or vet them. So that's why I'm a little bit sad to see that we don't necessarily have the check from an independent body outside of that. The ban list was not just a thing for players, it was also a thing for Wizards of the Coast. It was also a way to communicate with them. And we've lost that voice. And that's one of the things that has me just a little concerned or bummed or just doing a an inhale and preparing for the future. And especially, I don't think that we feel the effects of it for a while, sort of like the reserve list. The reserve list was a response to a pretty immediate backlash that happened around reprints, and it was the Chronicles era. And years later, it's constantly reviled. And I think that's the same pace that we'll feel here.
Well, and I don't know about that even, Joey. So they mentioned that they don't want to ban cards too often, but they will do an initial review of the current ban list and the cards on it.
Yes, they did say that, yeah.
So with that said, and that point kind of jumped out to me immediately.
Yeah.
And this has all been sparked by recent bannings that just happened with Dockside, with Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, etc. I if they reprinted Nadu fairly soon, I would be shocked. But with Wizards of the Coast and their reprints kind of being scheduled out so far in advance, I would not be shocked. And this is tinfoil hat. I need to clarify. I have zero insider information. This is very Charlie Kelly murder board type of observation here, but it would not surprise me at all if one of those recently banned cards is already slated for reprint, already been sent to printers, already been packaged for reprinting. It would not shock me at all. And so one of those 3 cards will come off the ban list. Maybe not the first opportunity that Wizards of the Coast gets, but very, very quickly in order to salvage like the reprint equity that was banned. I do not know that for sure. I just need to make sure everybody knows. This is Matt putting on his tinfoil hat, and I'm going to take it off right now.
No, I'm with you. I think that it would not surprise me at all if in, like, let's say the next 6 months or so, we do see a group of unbannings, including at least one of the cards that has been a source of consternation. If you're a company, if you're a corporation, you're doing the math that like you had a volunteer group running this stuff. You didn't need to pay anyone to do it. So why would you go out of your way to pay anyone to do it? But you do the math on how much money is impacted by upcoming product releases that like, oh, well, if there's certain stuff that is banned that is about to be on shelves, maybe that math is actually worth it for me to take that plunge. I again think that whoever does end up forming this new rules panel within Wizards of the Coast will try their damnedest to try and guide the health of the game. The point simply is the corporate reality is a new pressure that has been placed on the format's governing body.
Yep.
And that's where my concern currently lies. But again, I don't think we feel the effects of it immediately. I think we feel the regret in a couple of years from now.
Yeah, I don't think it'll take a couple of years, but I imagine kind of how, the rush of product that has been coming out, we're finally getting to feel that because of the effects of Wizards of the Coast becoming a division of Hasbro versus a subsidiary. And I've kind of mentioned that a couple times on previous podcasts, but 100%. Like it's going to take a little bit to feel the full effects, but there will be kind of signpost events that are going to kind of give us a hint of what the new regime looks like. And yeah, it's really hard to kind of grasp it because there's so much we don't know. Speaking of things that we don't know, they introduced a power bracket, actually.
Yeah.
Another thing that Wizards of the Coast would like to kind of steer towards as far as just how people are categorizing their decks and their games and everything. And that even, we don't know very much, but there's a lot to kind of unpack with that. And so I'm curious what the two of you think about this proposed power bracket. I guess, well, like somebody tell us even what it is.
So they talked about separating power rankings into 4 different categories. And they said they don't want to do a point system like Canlender because that seems too complex and competitive for casual commander.
Yeah.
But they also talked about some cards being things that would sort your deck into a certain category. It was always all very vague and nebulous, in part because they had no time. Right. So I don't want to sound like I'm being critical when I say that. They just mentioned 4 different categories with which your deck would roughly fall. So you could say my deck is a category 3 versus a power level 3 or something. I mean, it all sounds like what people were already kind of doing. But I'm going to withhold too much thought on it till we get more information because we just didn't get very much.
Yeah, it was pretty sparse. And again, to credit to Aaron Forsyth and Gavin Verhey, they said like this is very, very early on. This is open beta type of brain crafting, but they did want to give us something. So I do appreciate that they just didn't leave us hanging and they kind of let us know what they're looking for and then ask for community feedback to kind of develop the idea further, which is that's super important. But that's kind of how we workshop this podcast. Even one of us comes up with an idea, the other 2 give feedback, and we workshop through. Yeah. I'm glad that they're saying that this is not set in stone. That is reassuring. I do like that Gavin said he doesn't want to do a 5-point system because people will lean towards the middle, make people choose a 2 or a 3, upper or higher. But the tiers itself, and they kind of broke it down as kind of, 1 is the low power level, cards that can go in pretty much any deck. Cards like Swords of Plowshares, Grave Titan are 2 examples. A 2 is a step up above that with Fabricate, Thalia, step up again, tutors, like personal tutor, Dranith Magistrate, and then 4 is the high power, where it's cards that will only go in the highest power decks or specific levels, whether it's a Vampiric Tutor, Armageddon, those kind of the cream of the crop type of cards. Do you think that's a good start for a power level breakdown? Do you think it's an improvement on the current system even?
So this is, to me, it just feels like the same system wearing a different hat.
It's the Rule Zero conversation with extra steps.
Kind of, yeah. Again, they said nothing's going to beat a regular pregame conversation. That's the first and foremost the thing that is going to encourage. And the reason that some kind of system is helpful in the first place is because, for instance, newer players don't have the game knowledge to advocate for themselves most effectively.
Yeah.
Many folks are socially awkward and don't feel equipped to advocate for the experiences that they're hoping to get from the game. And on top of that, let's be honest, we also have to try and limit the damage that can be done by people who are like angle shooting, the people who do stuff like abuse a friendly mulligan system, that kind of thing. Commander is many formats in a single format. We all come here and we need some type of way to discuss, hey, is your deck the equivalent of a standard deck or the equivalent of a legacy deck? Are we about to match a modern deck against a vintage deck? We have to negotiate that. And we've all brought our own game pieces to that. And that is what makes it a tricky discussion in the first place. It is very difficult for a single set of rules to be comprehensive enough to completely cover all of the various things that Commander can be.
Yes, 100%.
This particular thing, if I'm giving feedback, what I'm reminded of a little bit is that speech from Peter Capaldi in an episode of Doctor Who where he's talking about a war. And he's like, how many hearts will have to be broken before everyone does what they were always going to have to do from the very beginning, sit down and talk?
Sure.
That's a little bit of how I feel about this. It seems like a very complicated way to negotiate out of having to have a conversation with the people you're about to play in a game with for an hour. Some kind of system is helpful, but I don't know that bracketing individual cards.
But to your own point, though, Joey, not every player's very well equipped, especially newer players. And I think this is what we do need a point system for, or some not necessarily a point system, because a point system means something specific with Canadian Highlander, which Blake kind of talked about. We need some way for players who are new to the game to kind of point to that is easily accessible, that is easily understood by people who are just getting into the game. Because that's the biggest hurdle in my mind is players that are just starting don't know how to enumerate these things. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I love that they put precons at level 1, like decks, the cards that can go in pretty much any deck. A lot of precons are going to start here, because how many decks these days are worse than precons? I don't think that population is very many. And this is immediately, granted, almost anything could be an improvement over the 10-point system that players have kind of used out of habit recently, because everybody thought, okay, well, if 5 is a precon, precons were never an average deck. Precons were the base level. And so putting precons back at the bottom of the tiers, that is going to help so many more players, because that's how players start to get into Commander. Something needed to be done. And from that point of view, this is already an improvement. But I do get what you're saying, where players still need to advocate for themselves. But me looking out for the new player, they don't always know how to have those conversations because they don't know what so many of these things mean.
And I just don't think, in terms of just the simplicity of the approach to it, I don't know that bracketing individual cards captures any amount of simplicity.
Sure. Yeah. I agree with that feedback. Yeah.
I think there's half a dozen different things in EDH that you could say that's a terrible way to do that. And I think you're correct. I think there's a bunch of things in EDH that we do in a way that is a terrible way to do it. I also think the terrible way we do it is still better than the worse alternatives. Rule Zero conversation is a terrible way to deal with power balance, but I don't think there's a better system. There's a bunch of those things that I think that there isn't a way to improve on. I don't believe, when all is said and done, this categorization system will be better than just talking to people, but my mind is open to see what they come up with and to give it a try.
I have yet to find anything more effective or more simple when playing games with strangers than just asking, hey, what's your deck do? And how fast does it? Are we going fast, or is this a laid back beer and pretzels kind of situation? Are you here to do something cool? Are we here to win?
Particularly if you're willing to model it first and say, this is my deck. I'm probably going to start making a move to win on turn 8 at the soonest. It's blue, so I've got some counter spells in here, but I want to run 6 or 7. This isn't a 15 counter spell deck. And I've got some control elements that might slow you up a little bit. If you can model that in a 30-second conversation, I think even someone who isn't used to doing that knows what they then need to give you for feedback. It's always worked for me, but I'm willing to try something else if they are going to come up with something else.
Heck, we have the SALT scores on EDHREC, which are voted on not by a committee, but by the Magic community. And that's also a system that goes up to 4 points. And those scores are helpful to clue people in on cards that can be a little whoa for the average table. But even then, we don't remember the SALT scores of hundreds of cards, you know? And even that system still misses certain things that can cause sourness at a commander table. Dana himself has mentioned that a big problem in power evaluation is that a deck filled with cleverly assembled crap can often blow out a deck that is full of huge bombs, just because of that deck's synergies. So I'm a little skeptical of the brackets thing, just because I envision that it's entirely possible to be at a table of all twos or whatever and still end up with a game that ends before turn 5 just because of one very synergistic deck. Last week I played the new Valgavoth precon against 3 really high power decks, including a control deck full of Cyclonic Rifts and the very best counter spells, Fierce Guardianship and all that. And with that precon, I demolished the entire table on turn 8. And you know what? We all had a blast. So that's why I just default to asking about what's the experience we want to have and asking about estimated game length. Because if you need a number, that one is so much simpler. It lets us mix tons of various deck types against each other. And I just think it sets a better expectation.
My biggest concern that I hope that they iron out is they said, well, if you're playing one Vampiric Tutor, then your deck is a 4. I don't love that. And maybe instead it kind of works out to I'm playing 2 cards that are a 4 and the rest are all 2s. Maybe something like that. But again, that puts more pressure on players to do more homework. And I don't think that giving players homework before they play a game is a good way to go about it.
Yeah. And that is my concern as well. I think trying to flesh out this kind of system feels a little wrong-footed, like we're trying to sail into the wrong harbor a little bit. My initial impression is that it strikes me as complicated and homeworky. And future debates of whether XYZ card is a 2 or a 3 feels to me like they could be missing the forest for the trees, getting lost in the specifics and missing the actual bigger picture. So that's my feedback is all. I caution Wizards making, for instance, ban decisions based on the assumption that this system will work. I want to remind people, including Wizards of the Coast, that bans have never stopped problem players from being problem players, because the issue is not the rules or the numbers or the brackets or the cards, it's the problem player. We're all out here trying to talk about some kind of rules or legislative solution to a social problem, but social problems require social solutions, and this is the social format.
Yeah.
So are we all focusing on trying to get these numbers to line up, or are we focusing on player satisfaction? This current brackets proposition feels to me a little bit like a way to get players to focus on the former rather than focusing on the latter. So that's why I don't feel confident in the concept right away.
Yeah, and it comes down to the adage of like, be the change you want to see in the world. If you think that you have a system, like model it, and if people think it's a good system, then it will catch on. That's how Commander itself came to be.
Sure.
These judges made a format that they wanted to play, and people caught on. And so the biggest thing is giving, Wizards of the Coast, tweeting at Gavin politely, please do it politely, but like, hey, here's an idea that I have, and then explain it and find some way to advocate for it in a positive way that isn't dumping on another way to do it. That's the big thing. And I hope we're not trying to come across too critical of it, because I do think that there's value in a 4-point system, but I'm also There's just questions that need to be answered with this 4-point system.
It's brand new. It's fresh. So
100%.
Of course they don't have it all, which I understand. And
this is only 2 days work. We need to point out again.
And I want to note, for my feedback, I think it does, in a couple of ways, feel like we're overcomplicating something very, very simple. Mm-hmm. It feels like we're trying to create an instruction manual about the way that music makes you feel. It feels like we're trying to learn how to play sports from reading a book. Bracketing individual cards, it sounds overcomplicated. Yeah. And I understand that a lot of people will feel daunted by the idea of those pregame chats. We've seen comments before of people characterizing it as a 30-minute discussion. It clearly takes up a lot of space in people's minds that this whole idea of Rule Zero pregame chat can feel a little bit big or feel ridiculous. But I just don't think that it is or that it needs to be, and that there are ways we can encourage and promote that as and a potentially more effective system than giving a bunch of cards individual numbers.
If it's taking you half an hour to have a pregame conversation, you are not describing your decks, or people at your pods aren't describing their decks very well, because you should be able to say, like, what kind of game are we looking for? And then adjust pretty quickly from there.
It's really as easy as that. Yeah. And I've heard people say that you don't rule zero most aspects of your life and stuff like that when parodying the idea of rule zero pregame chats. But like, the honest truth is that, yes, you do.
You absolutely do.
Yeah, it just means have a conversation. Just get on the same page. Don't skip the first part of a social situation, a social interaction, and then commit to an experience that it turns out you might not like. You do that in every facet of your life, and that can also be true of Commander.
People who knock the Rule Zero conversations, the pregame conversations, whatever you want to call it, and say it doesn't work, a first date is a Rule Zero conversation when you think about it.
It's just, which restaurant are we going to?
Yeah. Right. I was going to say that. Every time you decide where you're going to go to get a beer that night, you guys have that Rule Zero conversation.
Finding something that everybody can agree with, that can sign on board for.
Yeah, it seems it's just not that foreign of a concept. That objection always seems a little bit disingenuous to me. But regardless, I don't have much else to say about this because I don't know enough about it.
100%.
I don't have a lot of faith, like I said, but like I'm open-minded to see what they drop on us in the next week or two. It's where we should get some information here pretty quickly because Vegas is not that far off, and they said they want to have something out before then.
Yeah.
So I will withhold my opinion and keep an open mind until we get something from them about what their vision of that looks like.
Yeah, I think that there could be something here, but again, it's so early. Anybody who's drawing conclusions about this system is getting ahead of themselves. We don't know enough. Wizards of the Coast, who put this out, they themselves do not know enough about this to make any decision. So like I know it stinks to sit and wait because there's been so much coming so fast. But with this, the power bracket specifically, we do need more information to draw conclusions. All right. Well, I guess before we go and wrap up, I'm going to put words in both of your mouths real quick. We just want to thank the rules committee, the CAG members, but specifically the rules committee. We want Toby, Gavin, Scott, Olivia, Jim. Thank you so much just for like everything that you gave again to the community, gave to this format, gave to the game. I don't know if people will ever really thank you enough, and we just want to make that first step because the game, the format would not be what it is without the five of you. And I mean, obviously Sheldon, Sheldon's not with us anymore, but Sheldon gave almost his entire life to this game. And so I thank you so much just to the rules committee and for all the hard work and all. The three of us will remember that. And so just thank you so much for everything that you did and just getting the game to where it is today.
And to players as well, the format will be fine. It will absolutely survive this. You don't get to become the most popular format by accident. We can have our concerns, and that's just because we care. We all care so much about this game, but we still have the ability to let's go play some Commander and have a good time with each other.
Absolutely.
And yeah, considering how many dominoes have begun to tip over from, just these bans, this will not be the last time we address this, probably on a rec room in the next, month and in months, probably, whether it's dealing with, potential unbans or dealing with the bracket system or whatever. We'll have lots more to say because, like we said, this is a once in an EDH lifetime event happening on a weekly basis.
And they just keep happening.
Yeah. So there will be more to come. I guarantee it.
Yeah. And this, as with so many things, is kind of a lesson in fandom as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us in the Rec Room. As always, let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. We'll be back at you next week with a more regular episode, unless there's another game-changing event that happens next Monday too. But I think for now we can ease into the developments as they are happening. So thank you all again. And as always, remember to EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.